there is a responsibility of the organization to actually own how they create jobs and how they engage people with those jobs to make sure that there is opportunity for them to feel engaged. When we think about some of these challenges, right, like high level retention turnover as a challenge, or maybe frontline engagement as a challenge, when we think about those, there are some very specific ways that you can action and strategize how to create those problems into opportunities for your business. So if you think about engagement, for example, many of the employees that work are young, they're early in their careers, they're balancing things like jobs and family, and they have a lot going on. So how do we think about that problem and actually turn it into an opportunity? So how do we leverage them connecting with our brand, them connecting with the developmental opportunities that we can provide, whether that's promotions into shift leads or managers or training roles, to kind of leverage what they're looking for in a career with things that will actually drive our business results at the end of the day as well. And so I'm hoping to kind of walk us through, how do we do that? How do you do that if you're a small, individual business, or how do you do that if you're a larger chain business? Because I know that there'll be folks with lots of different experiences in the room.
Yep.
And one of the other things that I really want us to hone in on is, how do you create culture and make culture a part of your strategy? My area of research is emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence in leadership. And so I am also hoping to dive in a little bit into how, not only, for the people in the room, how their individual emotional intelligence impacts the work that they do, but how they can start to think about creating an emotional culture that helps to drive business results. Because at the end of the day, we all go to work a million hours every single week, right? And none of us want to show up to work and hate the work that we do, or feel dread about having to go there, or what we have on our plate for the week. We want to show up and enjoy our work, and we want to show up and feel like we're valued and there's meaning in this. And I like my coworkers. I get to do things I enjoy. Well, we can create some of that momentum in how we think about building the emotional culture for our team. So we're going to do a little deep dive into both kind of your own leadership emotional intelligence, but then also, how do you leverage that to create emotional culture, for a positive emotional culture for the teams that you support?
Yeah, that emotional intelligence part of your session, I'm really excited to get into. Workshop. It's a workshop. It's not a session. That part of the workshop, I'm really excited to dig into. But and then you're going to kind of shift into, I know you said this idea of rewriting the engagement playbook. So that's going to be more, I'm assuming, more of that hands-on workshop experience would be kind of unpacking more of those traditional engagement strategies that just aren't working anymore, and then what are new approaches that you can take and explore. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those strategies that just aren't working, and why we're going to kind of shred them a bit at Roadmap?
Sure. Well, so, it's interesting. I do think that oftentimes when we think about engagement, we focus a lot around, how do we get people excited for work? And sometimes we're just not excited for work, right? Like, that's just not, like, you can't make someone excited for every single part of their job. I know, even I love the work that I do, but there are some days where I'm like, I absolutely do not want to do this thing that I have to do. And there's nothing you could pay me or throw at me or get me to do to get me excited for this part of my job. And so what often gets missed in the engagement side is that we miss that there is a responsibility of the organization to actually own how they create jobs and how they engage people with those jobs, to make sure that there is opportunity for them to feel engaged. So yes, as an individual employee, I have to own showing up and giving my best self at work, and trying to be motivated even in the tasks that I don't love. But there's a responsibility on the other side for us, particularly in the people space, but for all business leaders, to think about the way in which we allow people to be engaged in the work that they do. Do we ask for their opinions? Do we get their feedback on what's working or what's not working? Sometimes the simplest engagement strategies are just, how often do we ask people about what ideas they have for the work that they're doing?
Mm.
And we miss, because we think that engagement has to be this big, a big party that we throw, or a big event that we have, or some larger benefit that's going to cost us millions of dollars down the road. And no, sometimes engagement is just having a reminder on my calendar every week to go check in with my employees and ask them, hey, how'd this week go? And what can we do better next week? And that simple piece can really engage them. And that costs me nothing except a few minutes of my time. And so what I want people in this workshop to do is to step back from all the ways that they've tried to engage in the past. Look at some, like, here's some big things that we've tried to do from strategy, but here's some simple ideas. And how can we connect the dots on the simple things that are actually going to have and drive the most value for our business, instead of these big strategic plans that actually don't create engagement on the front line?
So one of the last moments during your workshop will be something you're referring to as an action lab, which sounds super fun. So let's talk about what's going to happen at this action lab, and what kind of commitments are we going to be asking our attendees to create and then hold themselves accountable to during this lab.
Yeah, so Action Lab sounds very technical, or, like it's going to be a school space. It's not. It's really going to be about you coming in and thinking creatively about how to engage and solve some of the problems that you have when you go back. And so I call it an Action Lab because you have to be open to the ideas that you've learned throughout the day in order to think about, how am I going to action them as I leave? And sometimes, like, as you're learning something, you might get one idea in your mind, but then when you start thinking about that idea in action, you're like, oh, that's not actually going to work. And so it's about sort of synthesizing what we learn throughout the day, and then figuring out which of these is actually something that I can go and leverage when I get back. And maybe it's more than one, maybe it's just one, or maybe it's a combination of a few things that you're going to go figure out what it looks like. So my goal is that as a part of that ending session, that every single person who comes walks away with something that they feel like they can go action in their organization. And whether that's an action for strategy for the business, something for your team that you support, or maybe it's just something personal for you in your career. Like, this is something that I know I need to action and learn and develop more on. And so from this, I'm going to go and do XYZ, because no strategy is just like here it is, let's go execute. It's here it is, I think. And then also I need to figure out what other things I'm going to do to make sure it works. And so being willing to do that work on the back end is going to be really important.